everybody, this is Kyo Kusagane bringing you a commentated replay of Psycho Soldier, the first one on YouTube featuring Athena's lovably dorky sidekick, Sie Kensou. As usual, if you'd like to see the video without my blathering voice, there's a link in the description to watch the run without my voice for those of you that prefer silence or the game audio. This was the first video game to sing vocal songs aloud without any external audio devices. Midway's 1983 game Journey played separate ways with an external cassette player within the cabinet, but Psycho Soldier manages to do that on a standard JAMA PCB, making it an important part of Japanese gaming history. My run, however, used the US version, which was probably dubbed over in one afternoon by anyone in the localization office that could sing half decently. It's an endless source of unintentional comedy compared to the Japanese version, which had an actual celebrity playing the role of Athena. May Kaori Shimizu's talent be preserved in pixels forever. Usually when I do a gaming commentary, it's heavily scripted and timed to key moments in the replay to break everything down into explainable chunks. This one's a little different. I improvised most of my speech and just said whatever came to mind at the time, and there's a good reason for that. My next major video was supposed to be about the top 10 PlayStation games that didn't age, and it was in direct response to the PlayStation Store's closure on PS3 and PS Vita. But Sony's own Jim Ryan has since announced they're not going to shutter these marketplaces, keeping them open for a little while longer, rendering my own video intro inaccurate in the process. I'm not sure what could have caused this change of heart. It might have been a massive upsurge in sales after the announcement, or the prospect of beating pirates by discouraging custom firmware and getting those sales in the first place. But in my humble opinion, having an avenue to sell your games at all means you're gonna make money off of them. I'll gladly accept being able to buy and play games like Psycho Soldier wherever I go until there's a solution to selling these games again on PlayStation 5. Jim Ryan admitted he doesn't understand older games, but he doesn't have to. He's earning easy PR for himself, and he's taking advantage of what he has in front of his face. That seems like a win for everyone. Back to the game at hand, now that we've gotten the important stuff out of the way. Psycho Soldier's an auto-scrolling platformer that has so much charm and creativity poured into it beyond its singing, taking a lot of inspiration from Capcom's Sun, but making it better and weirder. A lot of this game's charm comes from its setting and its expressively lively characters, which were extremely fresh when this game hit arcades in 1987. Those advancements in presentation largely making this more appealing than Sun to me. Take a closer look at the jumpsuited, bandana-wearing Kensou and his animations. He wears the attire of a strong, masculine man, popularized by movies like Rambo, and that's clearly what he wants to be. SNK's blatantly copied Rambo's toughness and played that straight when they made the Ikari Warriors. But Kensou flubs his landings cartoonishly whenever he tries to show off by doing front flips at the end of every level. Just like your best friend or next door neighbor trying to be Tony Hawk and falling off the skateboard. It's incredibly human. It makes our protagonists way more interesting and dynamic than run-of-the-mill heroes. And this was just the beginning of character development in gaming. It's a strength SNK would wear on their shoulders from now until the present day, as they'd go on to make an expansive roster full of great characters that have always stood out from the crowd. Some highlights include Terry Bogard from Fatal Fury, Kyo from The King of Fighters, and that bad boy Iori Yagami whose rowdy nature didn't have any equal in fighting games at the time. They even revisited their earlier ideas when they made The King of Fighters to evolve them and keep them up to current standards. Ralph and Clark went from being Rambo ballot swaps to being the hot-headed one and the cool and disciplined one, respectively. Speaking of which, I just pulled a Kensou myself by tripping on the rock and dying. Nobody said I was perfect at video games all the time. Don't mind the mistake, it happens. Back to what I was saying. It's truly astonishing how quickly video games evolved since people thought two squares bouncing another square around was as good as it was going to get. Video games are not books or movies, but they took inspiration from them when the technology allowed for it to create timeless masterpieces like these. Even implementing a little basic human emotion gave us characters like Dirk the Daring with Dragon's Lair. In Psycho Soldier's case, the inspiration could have come from Super Space Fortress Macross, which kickstarted an idol craze that lasted a long time. The idol in that series, Lin Minmay, was a beacon of hope for everyone fighting against the hostile forces, and Athena serves a very similar role in Psycho Soldier, having tons of color and contrasting the dark, apocalyptic world around her. None of that variety was thought possible in 1975, yet that's what you get in 1987, all with the same simple controls that anyone can understand from the Atari age. That's why I'm fond of arcade games from the late 80s. You had tons of flair and all the accessibility that the early 80s had to offer, creating half a decade of games that look nice and play very well without scratching your head over too many complex rules. I can pick up and play Psycho Soldier or Gradius anytime when I don't have the energy for something more convoluted. And then when I feel like having something thoughtful and complex, I can hit up a more modern game like any one of the Street Fighter 2s. Shifting gears a bit to talk about SNK and their games for a bit. Pre-Neo Geo SNK tended to be hit or miss, but they were always trying out weird new ideas alongside the other industry pioneers of the early 80s. This is actually the follow-up to an earlier game simply named Athena, although the gameplay of both titles are nothing alike. That game was one of the earliest hybrids of a platformer and an RPG, requiring you to explore the maze-like levels to find essential items for winning, and it was extremely jank. Psycho Soldier decided to dump the weird, experimental ideas and create a mostly straightforward shooter instead, opting to focus on innovation outside the core gameplay, and since that's a formula that was already well established, it's much more refined and playable today. We're descending underground for Stage 3, and this is where the game starts ramping up its challenge. So now would be a good time to talk about big brain strategies and advanced game mechanics. Of course you run to the right and shoot shit, but the two major resources you have to keep track of are your Psycho Balls and your energy meter. Yes, that is where they got the name for that special move in the King of Fighters. Athena had that ability from the start. You begin every life with 4 of them surrounding you, and you collect numerous more from the walls you destroy throughout the game. These serve 2 purposes. They act as a barrier that can protect you from stray projectiles, but more importantly, they can be launched and used as smart bombs with varying effects, depending on your energy level. The energy meter is not a health bar. It measures the strength of your psychic energy, and it gets powered up as you walk through the beams of light. You die in one hit, but are given lives every 60,000 points. I mention all this now because up until this point, you could have done perfectly fine just blasting your way through the sewer lizards without using these powers. But this is where the game starts throwing tanky enemies at you that demand you understand how your powers work to avoid getting powered down or dying. When you've reached yellow power, your Psycho Balls are launched straight ahead and pierce through everything, including walls. And when you're at or close to maximum power, the red zone, you fire 2 of them in a wavy pattern that also goes through everything effortlessly, meaning they're twice as effective. When your barrier gets hit by anything, you lose some energy which downgrades the strength of its attack until you run out of power completely, at which point your balls won't absorb projectiles anymore. That's where the strategy comes in. You need to single out these dangerously thorny cavern balls and destroy them as soon as possible before they can do a number on your energy by spamming projectiles. And you need to conserve some of your Psycho Balls for these important moments and not waste them on trivial threats. As an added bonus, your Psycho Balls can also bail you out of a desperate emergency because they grant you 6 iframes whenever you use one, potentially saving you from a lethal situation if you're about to be stabbed by a monster. Desperately using a Psycho Ball has saved my life on more than one occasion in this run, especially in Waterworld. This creates an excellent difficulty curve that starts off forgiving and easygoing and demands more out of you as you go deeper and deeper if you want to play the game well and get high scores. It makes the game exceptionally fair for an arcade game. most of the time. We'll talk about that section when we get there. Now that the basics are covered, here's a quick breakdown of Super Psycho Balls and how they relate to my strategy. If you max out everything, you have 8 Psycho Balls in reserve and you have maximum power, you get upgraded to Super Psycho Balls, which nuke everything on the screen when they're used, but drain your energy by 1 entire level until you use it all up, leaving you with no balls and no energy after you use them all. Supers can be extremely useful in specific circumstances, especially bosses, but I find it better not to be at full power all the time so I can always have balls when I need them the most. As usual, I recommend experimenting with them yourself. You might have better luck with the supers in the levels than I do. One strategy doesn't always suit everyone, but if I'm sharing it with you, it might be useful to you. Try it out! Entering Waterworld, by far the most visually pleasing area in the entire game, is perfect timing to talk about the various power-ups that you can collect. I was a goddamn dragon for the last fourth of Stage 3, so the various pickups deserve an explanation. They aren't entirely obvious, and their effects could hinder players if they played the PSP version, which didn't have the arcade instruction card. Most of them are self-explanatory. Floating spheres are extra Psycho Balls to add to your stock. The F is an incredibly rare item that gives you full power when it's collected. And skulls are bad. They're power downs and should be avoided. What you need to watch out for are the arrows and the eggs, which can screw at you if you're unaware of what they do. Sometimes the game will spawn an up arrow or a down arrow in random blocks, and these control the difficulty of the game. Usually, up is good in a video game. But no, not this one. Down arrows are one of the best items you can pick up in Psycho Soldier, if they appear. Getting a down arrow permanently decreases the game's difficulty by 1 level for the entire run, meaning enemies will keep dying in one shot instead of taking multiple hits to kill. Likewise, I can't emphasize this enough. Unless you really want to press your luck going for high scores, avoid up arrows like the plague. It's worse than getting powered down. That only leaves us with mystery eggs, 2 per level with the exception of the finale. What's inside? Well, nobody knows. This might be one of the earliest loot boxes in an arcade game. Either a bunch of bug-eyed alien grubs hatch out of it and kill you if you're too close when you open it, or you get the ultimate power-up, your transformation. Grabbing the flame will turn our hapless hero into the real badass he always wanted to be. A bona fide fire-breathing dragon that rips through levels like Reese's Pieces. I've seen people assume that the egg was always bad news thanks to the chance of death in there. So heed my advice. It's always worth opening, but make sure you keep your distance so you don't get worm slime all over your sweet clothes, okay? By the way, there's this gnarly looking mutant fish with 4 eyes and beautiful golden fins stalking you throughout the entire stage. That's the bullet vomiter you need to dispose of ASAP. We forgot to bring our fish food with us, so we're on the menu instead. Second idiotic mistake of the run. Took a bath and drowned because Kensou screamed while he was underwater. Maybe he wouldn't drown if he didn't open his big stupid mouth while he was down there. Dying makes recovery a little bit rough until you restore your shot power by stepping in the beams of lightning. And you want to try to avoid it if possible, because you need as many lives as you can muster for the last area. This watery level may not be as sharp of a difficulty increase as Stage 3 was, but there's still some harrowingly tricky jumps that can leave you reaching for your snorkel if you're not precise. Pausing for a moment to appreciate some pristine pixel art, and statues of the goddess Athena. This is how Psycho Soldier is loosely tied to the previous game, as it is the same character, reincarnated as a pop star. No, there's no relation to that pink fluffball Kirby, as much as you might want to think otherwise. It might be a little late to mention it now, but Psycho Soldier also has a basic scoring system for replayability. Whenever I reveal a UFO or a balloon out of a rock, I deliberately wait and let them float around for a bit before I nab them. The longer you wait before you get a bonus item, the more points it'll be worth. Up to a maximum of 8,000 for UFOs if they're all the way at the top of the screen. Although this game is mostly solid, SNK's early janky programming still seeps in every once in a while. Do not jump if you're at the top of the screen here. If you jump when you're at the very top of the screen in this boss arena, you'll rise through the platform and the game will pull an Action 52, teleporting you to the bottom and killing you instantly. A surprisingly nasty glitch, if I do say so myself. But now you know how to avoid it, and as G.I. Joe would say, knowing is half the battle. Entering the blazing hot lava area. Hope you brought your sunscreen and your headphones, because you're in for some hot jams. I think this is the best song in the game that isn't the theme song the game is named after. I'll let a loop of it play out so you can hear for yourself. That sounds upbeat and bombards you with a heroic chorus, fitting for how far you've come and what danger you'll be facing ahead, since it's still far from over. This is also your last chance to attain your transformation before it's gone for good, so if you see it, jump at it immediately and relish it for as long as you can. Seeing as we're late into the game now, let's chat about how this game was preserved long term and the different releases that it had over the years. It's fairly easy to get a hold of Arcade Psycho Soldier nowadays if you're interested in trying the game yourself, thanks to the emerging importance of retro gaming. SNK first made it available in 2011 as part of their SNK Arcade Classics Zero Pack, only released in Japan. But they took the games out of that collection and sold them at a much lower price individually here in the United States. So you could buy Psycho Soldier for $3, and that was the very first time the arcade version made it to a console. The PSP to be more specific. While you can't beat that price for the great game you get, it came with a myriad of issues that are very noticeable. I have to stress that version played well and it was great taking Psycho Soldier on the go, but these problems were super noticeable even when it was brand spanking new. Some of the dip switch settings were wrong, so you weren't getting extra lives as frequently as you should have, but the more damning problem is that there's no way to play multiplayer period, which is especially baffling because this was designed as a co-op game. Fast forward to April 25th, 2019, and we have those handsome fellows over at Hamster doling out high quality emulations as they do best, with a perfect port of Psycho Soldier to Nintendo Switch and PS4. It's $7 instead of $3, but all the toggleable settings are there, and Sie Kensou isn't thrown under the bus, making it the far superior version. Even better than that, in June of the same year, Digital Eclipse teamed up with SNK to release a love letter to fans of all their arcade games with the SNK 40th Anniversary Collection, which is the best deal by far if you like at least half of the other games in that collection. I find it a notable achievement because they found a great solution for controllers for all the rotary joystick games like Ikari Warriors and Bermuda Triangle, using the right analog stick on an average controller to aim in that direction. It's so much more value than just the games though. All the promotional material and the hype surrounding the games are represented too, making that on par with Namco Museum as far as how complete and comprehensive it is. You're about to see just how good the Super Psycho Balls can be. This is my backup strategy just in case I don't have the dragon here, and it one-shots every boss, not just Gungar as I like to call him. Rocky's a pretty good name for this guy too. I call him that because of the noises he makes when you shoot him. One last power-up area before the finale as we march straight into the enemy base. It's worth mentioning some dragon or phoenix strategies before we descend one last time. Your enormous body can take out enemies instantly at the expense of one energy point, with the exception of bosses. So if you see a dangerous enemy, don't hesitate to bump it. That's better than taking bullets in the face and losing lots of energy. Alright, we're finally here. The infamous final stage. Up until this point, this was a solid grade A game. Not too challenging while still keeping pressure on you. Strategic action that requires know-how and dexterity, and really cool characters, making Psycho Soldier a pretty sweet deal for 5 out of 6 levels. This is where it starts falling apart though, game design wise, but it begins really promising with the most challenging enemies you've faced by far. Lots of alien menaces and slimy blobs shooting revenge bullets at you after you destroy them. Duke Nukem would have a field day blowing this place up. Needless to say, those enemies and even the random bullet spawns are not the problem. Hard enemy placement is to be expected on the last stage, and you can destroy those random enemy spawns too. You can probably take a guess what the problem is if you look at the pink walls. Until we get there, it's quite good. You're always going to want to err on the side of caution and use your balls on anything remotely dangerous here, because dying and getting powered down this late in the game is bad news. The most dangerous enemies in the bunch include the random blob spawns, and these amoebas with tentacle arms that have enormous hitboxes growing out of them. Aim for the center. Well, this is it. These corridors are regenerating walls that regenerate whenever they feel like it. Doesn't matter if you use your regular shot or your psycho balls on them. If the game gives you a bad dice roll, you're dead and there's nothing you can do about it. Ironically, I lucked out, but I goofed when I was trying to shoot the amoeba down. It does give you a general idea of what it's like if you get bad luck in this area though. I don't think I have to explain what's wrong here. This is completely out of the player's control when the entire rest of the game is in your control. I have some interesting things to say about that. Let's talk about bullshit arcade game design since I defend it more frequently than most people would. Electricity and rent cost money, you know. Imagine you're running an arcade. How do you think you're going to pay the electric bills if your players are outright playing Pac-Man for 3 hours straight on 25 cents? You aren't. You'd want to buy more challenging games so that you would make enough money to keep the lights on. Think back to when I did my Darius review. I outright excused Taito making the score items random for replayability, and I don't regret a thing I said. The question then becomes, is this game still fun for the players? And for both Psycho Soldier and Darius, the answer is yes to both of them. Although it is aggravating losing lives to the random crushing walls, in contrast to everything else being fair. It's still significantly fairer than an average Williams or Midway game like Revolution X or Smash TV, which are 100% quarter hungry and rightfully so. Most major studio video games are actually still doing this today, like being able to buy extra stuff in Call of Duty after you already bought the game, a philosophy that makes companies like Activision successful. And in all honesty, I thoroughly loved the Crash Bandicoot remasters. I bought those games when they came out and got many hours of enjoyment out of them. Therefore, just by buying the game and giving them money, I'm supporting that by default even though that game had no microtransactions. Buying a product from them indicates I'm cool with what they're doing, and coming up with any other excuses would just make me a hypocrite. There's nothing wrong with a little greed every once in a while, as long as the games themselves are not totally slanted and unfair. This is the final corridor of death before the last boss, and where you're most likely to lose a life. This is probably the hardest segment of the entire game because an amoeba is thrown at you the same time as the closing walls. If you somehow manage to get all the way over here without using up any of your ammunition, this is the time to upgrade to Super Psycho Balls. But in the very likely scenario you aren't, you're given one last power recharge to get your main shot strength back up to full power. One on the top and one on the bottom. The longer you can endure the treacherous gauntlet up until this point, the better chance you have succeeding in the decisive battle. Look at this monstrosity. Just behold and try to digest what you see. It has the head of a Geiger alien with exposed organs and a tail that has a mind of its own, deflecting and getting in the way of all your best shots. Is the pool of waste at the bottom even part of this alien's anatomy too? Who even knows? But it's deadly. This battle is a war of resources and attrition. You can increase your odds by firing off your Psycho Balls whenever she, or it, swoops in for a lethal bite with its big head, iframing your way out of danger. But if that fails, well, miracles happen. I'm not even sure what the hitbox on this thing is, but I should have died several times here. If you're lucky enough to have Super Psycho Balls, you just blast them all immediately, and the Queen, for lack of an original name, will die in one hit. If she ain't a queen, she'll deserve another majestic title. If not, do what I'm doing at the beginning of every life and pummel her exposed heart with everything you've got while you're in your invincible UFO, retreating when it's about to wear off. It lasts about 7 seconds, so make your retreat to the platform at the 6 count. If you have at least 8 lives remaining, this is an automatic victory regardless of how long you survive the Queen's onslaught. If not, keep your wits about you because even if your odds and your lives are low, there's still a chance you can pull out a victory anyway. I got in here with 5 lives, and by some miracle, I still won. Just when I thought I was done for, I ended up double KOing the slacker, and in a moment's notice, Sie Kensou and myself to that extent finally surpassed the alien queen in coolness, becoming the coolest guy on the face of the earth like Rambo. It's not actually game over until your character falls off the screen. The extra lives saved me. And with that, I'm signing off for now. I shall return in a few weeks when I'm done editing my main project. Hope you all enjoyed, and make sure you hit the like and subscribe buttons if you want to see more. I'm out for now.
Bye-bye.